Hi everyone, Kate here, and this week we are doing a very special festive video. Previous Christmases, we've discussed things such as Edwardian gifting etiquette, 1920s decorating advice, and historically inspired gift ideas. This year, my Patreons voted to have a look at Edwardian Christmas dinners. So, in this video, I will be discussing several different historical menus, the menu structure, some typical dishes. Just a heads up, I am going to be playing a little fast and loose with the term Edwardian. I hope no one reminds terribly. I will list the dates as we go along so you can see if it's early Edwardian, late Edwardian, or sort of this just pre-war period, which doesn't really have a name. Another thing to note just before we jump into the nitty-gritty of the menus is that most of the sources I drew from really were aimed at middle to upper classes. Most working class families and those, on the lower end of the social spectrum at the time would not have been able to afford these really lavish, multi-course feasts. What I'm going to be talking about was true for some people. It was not necessarily true for everybody. So just keep that in mind, that a lot of people during this time period would not have been able to even dream of affording this stuff. This is not something that everybody ate. Oh, wait, one last thing. I'm not trying any of the recipes today. I haven't tried them as of filming this part, but I will be releasing hopefully 3 videos between now and Christmas with some Edwardian Christmas recipes. I'm going to try sort of a starter. I don't know if I'm going to try a main course. I think I'm going to try, actually, it's a nut gravy, which can be used for a main course. And I'm going to try a dessert. So I'm going to try 3 simple recipes from this time period, but not today. We're just going to be talking about it today. Anyway, with all that preamble over, long introduction, let's get on to the food. I kind of have a feeling this video is going to make me a little bit hungry. Now, during the Edwardian era, it was very trendy to have a multitude of courses. There was certainly more than just, nowadays where you might have a starter, a big main course, and then dessert. There were going to be multitude of courses. In the sources I looked at, it was anywhere from about 4 to 9 seemed to be pretty standard. The highest number of courses I saw was 13 from this 1916 dinner at the Panama, California International Exposition, which is only $1.50 a plate, which I think was a heck of a value. I suspect the portions must have been pretty small. In terms of the order of the courses, there's a lot of variability between menus. There certainly wasn't just one way of doing things. But as a general rule, we start with either a soup course or a fruit course, followed by a soup course, before moving on to the savories. These would include both a fish course and a meat course or two. If there was a salad course, it was actually usually served after the main meal. Unlike today, when salad's sort of a starter, salad was served one rung below dessert. It was usually meant to finish a meal rather than begin one. Speaking of which, we then move on to the sweets, possibly divided into one round with a heavier dessert, such as a Christmas pudding, followed by something lighter, such as an ice, or perhaps some fruit if we didn't have it earlier in the meal. You sometimes see a lighter dessert served before the big heavy main dessert, but usually in those cases, you also have another light nibble after the heavy dessert, like something light with coffee, some cookies, or little cakes, biscuits, that sort of thing. I think you might have grasped by now that the Edwardians really like to eat. They really, really liked to eat. I'm pretty sure the portions, though, must have been comparatively small. There's just no way you could physically eat 13 huge courses, especially not if you're wearing a corset. I don't know if it's just me, but when I'm wearing a corset, I can't eat as much. There just physically isn't the room. Now, there were alternatives to these big grand dinners, such as a casual luncheon or a buffet supper. But these were really aimed more at the younger crowd and more immediate members of the household, rather than for entertaining adults. You see them a lot used to complement a larger meal later in the day, perhaps just the immediate household, the immediate family, having a special Christmas midday meal together, and then having friends or extended family come later for the big feast. Did I mention they liked eating? Christmas has long been a time of feasting, and the Edwardians took this to heart. Behind the scenes, there was maids, cooks, and other domestic servants bearing the brunt of the work to produce these grand feasts. Hiring domestic staff, even on a part-time basis, was pretty common among the middle classes, not just the upper classes during this pre-war period. Although more so during the early Edwardian period, getting a decent maid in the later part of the Edwardian period was becoming increasingly difficult. Many women preferred to work in factories. It was considered a higher social position to be a factory worker than to be a maid. You see this discussed in a lot of magazines where they discuss the problem of finding good help, good domestic help. Anyways, back to Christmas. I keep getting distracted by, the social realities of the time. We're not here to talk about that today. We're just talking about food. Anyways, the only way these big Christmas dinners were managed is with the use of help. There's no way that you could serve multi-course dinners and have everything come out fresh and at the correct temperature without having somebody doing the serving and some of the prep behind the scenes. It's just logistically would be an absolute nightmare. You'd have to have a family member doing the serving. And you do sometimes see that where one family member almost doesn't participate in the meal. They're just there serving, maybe like a maiden aunt or something, but somebody's got to be doing some of this work. These meals don't just happen. While there was a greater mobility of food than there ever had been before due to trains and increased modes of transport, people were still fairly reliant on what was available seasonally in their area. This means that most cooks would have been somewhat restricted in their choice of salads and different side dishes. For this reason, you see a lot of winter fruits and vegetables being used, such as apples, potatoes, Brussels sprouts, carrots, and oranges. Basically, either produce that stored really well, such as the apples and the carrots, or produce that transported really well, such as oranges, which were still considered a special Christmas time treat. With this in mind, many of the starter soups would have been broth-based. Edwardians liked really smooth soups, and even some of the thicker, heartier vegetable soups I've tried were all really well pureed and then strained to give a smooth and silky texture. They were not fans of sort of lumpy, chunky soups. You might have had a little bit of pasta or some meat or something floating in there, but in general, we're looking for a fairly smooth texture. Speaking of soup, I'm really curious to try this cranberry soup from 1904. It's basically a thickened cranberry juice. This is one of the recipes that I will be trying next week. It may be terrible. We will see. Of course, in addition to fresh produce, canned and bottled goods were a winter alternative. A rather interesting side dish from 1913 is for a gooseberry sorbet made with gooseberry jam. I've made historical ices before on my channel, and they're somewhat similar to making ice cream, but without the dairy. Sort of think like a slushy, but a slightly firmer texture. This ice isn't served as a dessert, though. It's served as a side to accompany the goose. Very interesting. You wouldn't think of serving an ice as part of a main course. Normally you think of it as a dessert, but... Okay, so speaking of goose, we're likely going to have both a fish course and a meat course. If fresh fish wasn't available, canned was usually used, oftentimes in something like a mousse, like a salmon mousse, or something to disguise the fact that the fish was canned. It would have been looked down upon to have people know that they were eating canned food. Canned food was, it wasn't cheap, like it wasn't inexpensive, but it was considered lesser. So usually when you're using canned and bottled food, you're going to turn it into something so you can't tell that it originally came out of a can. When it comes to the meat course, as meat is generally a less seasonally dependent ingredient, you do see a much greater variety of dishes being served. Goose was traditional, especially in the earlier Victorian era, but you also start to see turkey rising in popularity, likely due to the American influence. You also see roasts, hams, and duck of lamb. Yep, that's a piece of lamb made to look like a duck. presentation is everything. Now, vegetarianism was also around during this time period. You see many recipes for things like mock goose and nut turkey. I did actually try a hickory loaf last year. That was sort of listed alongside some of the fake meats. I should mention that Edwardian fake meats are nothing like modern fake meats. They are nothing like meat. But last year I tried a hickory loaf with a nut gravy. The nut gravy is fabulous. I'm definitely making nut gravy, and I'm going to share the recipe on here because it is delicious. The hickory loaf was kind of awful. I ate it, but it was not the best thing I've ever tried. No. I might try nut turkey instead of the hickory loaf this year. It's made by taking, I think it's nuts, peanuts, and spices, and then you get kind of an egg water mix to bind it all together. And then you shape it like a turkey, and you put little bits of pasta in to look like little leg bones. As I said, presentation is everything. I might have to do an update after Christmas, so I'm not going to make a video of that or anything, but maybe I'll do a little post or a little short or something and let you know how the nut turkey was. It may have been awful. When I think traditional Christmas, my mind immediately goes to plum pudding and fruitcakes. These were both really rich desserts that could be made well ahead of time. This was a big boon for the busy cook who had enough to do without worrying about baking a cake too. Or another cake. They might have been still baking little cakes, but you don't want to have to also bake a big cake on Christmas Day. That's a lot of work. You're already doing a lot of work. Take it easy. Christmas cakes were often made the second week of December and packed away to mellow and improve their flavor. Now, Christmas cake, fruit cake, and plum pudding, they're all very similar desserts. They consist heavily of dried fruit and sugar, mixed with flour and or breadcrumbs, and flavored with nutmeg, cinnamon, allspice, and sometimes a dash of brandy. The brandy's also in there to help preserve the dessert until Christmas time. The cakes are baked and the puddings were boiled in a bag or waterproof container of some sort. It's supposed to be more of a steam cook than a boil cook because the bag, you use flour to make sort of a waterproof coating, or you cook it in something where the water can't actually get inside. The idea here is that the pudding is steam cooking rather than directly coming in contact with the water. I've made traditional plum puddings in the past and they really do have sort of more of a cake texture. I think, especially North Americans, when we hear pudding, we think more like goopy, eat with a spoon kind of thing, but a plum pudding is a dense, cake-like dessert. They're really good too. The other difference between the two is that plum pudding is served with a custard or alcohol-based sauce, while the cakes would have been iced and decorated. I love Edwardian cake decorating. They went all out. There would have been icing, plus all sorts of almond paste decorations, candies, ribbons, and marshmallow white roses, which sound beautiful and tasty. I really regret eating all the marshmallows, or I would have tried that one too. Now, despite the richness of these cakes and puddings, there were other desserts on offer. This is Christmas after all. There must be a multitude of everything. In addition to the cakes and puddings, there were lighter offerings, such as trifles, ices, fruit, and more smaller cakes. Again, we're limited by what's available seasonally, so the desserts that use fruit are typically going to use apples, oranges, or dried fruit. Orange baskets were a trendy serving method, which is where you scoop out an orange half and use this as a little basket to hold candies or something like an iced dessert, fruit salad, or this version that has a piece of pound cake at the bottom, which is then topped with an orange-flavored whipped cream mixture. We also see real greenery used to decorate cakes, cookies, or placed in pots of ice cream to look like little mini Christmas trees. Spoiler alert, that's the third recipe I'm trying. It's the little Christmas tree ones. I don't have pots, so I'm going to have to use little cups instead, but I'm hoping it's adorable. And now we come to the end of the meal. Edwardian dinners pretty much always ended with a cup of coffee, and sometimes a little nibble. Which is my perfect idea of how to end a meal. Any meal that involves coffee is a good meal. Plus, you're probably going to need the extra energy from the coffee to digest that meal. And if you need just a little bit more inspiration, here are some historical menus from the Edwardian time period. Clear soup with vermicelli, fried sole, mutton cutlets à la Normandie, roast turkey, mashed potatoes and carrots à la Breton, Xmas pudding, mince pies and orange baskets, ham croutons, dessert. Oyster soup and wafers, celery and olives, baked turkey and giblet sauce, cranberry sauce, sweet and white potatoes, creamed onions, tomato jelly on lettuce leaves with French dressing, suet pudding and cider sauce, coffee, nuts, raisins, bonbons. Oyster cocktail, Bellevue bouillon and wafers, fish cutlets and cream sauce, baked turkey and giblet sauce, cranberry sauce, baked sweet potatoes, creamed onions, celery and apple salad with wafers, plum pudding and orange sauce, coffee, nuts, raisins, bonbons. Grapefruit, oyster bisque and celery, salmon mousse with potato balls, roast goose with spiced apples, cream baked cauliflower, sweet potatoes, chicory and apple salad, cheese balls, wafers, steamed fig pudding and hard sauce, ices and glasses, cakes, coffee. And for the vegetarians in the crowd, grapefruit, tomato bouillon with whipped cream, wafers, mock goose with cranberry applesauce, creamed onions, apple and celery salad, Jerusalem pudding, quince sauce. German lentil soup with toasted granose flakes, savory raised pie, mock goose, brown gravy, stuffed tomatoes, tomato sauce, macaroni cheese. Baked potatoes, mashed potatoes, Brussels sprouts, damson pickles. Christmas pudding with Devonshire cream, mince pies, trifle, apple compote, cheese and biscuits. Bananas, oranges, apples, almonds and muscatels, coffee, coconut cakes. Well, we're at the end of the video. Let me know down in the comments what your idea of a perfect Christmas meal is. Is it more like the Edwardians where there's lots of food and multiple courses, or do you prefer something a little more simple? I'm definitely halfway between minimalist Christmas and Edwardian Christmas. I do a bit of a blend. Like, I don't have a super pared down menu, but it's certainly not Edwardian levels either. I do a gluten-free plum pudding every year, which is fabulous. If anybody wants to know the recipe, just leave me a comment and I'll link it. Really good gluten-free. It's made with like it's made with beans. It's got almond flour in it, but it's made with beans. And every year I make it, I'm like, this shouldn't work, but it's delicious. So I do that every year, and I typically try at least 1 or 2 historical recipes. As I said, last year it was hickory loaf. I should mention I'm the only one that eats the vegetarian main course. So if it's awful, I'm the only one that has to choke it down, so it's fine. But yeah, I don't know what it'll be this year. I'm thinking nut turkey. Well, as always, thank you for watching. I hope you all have a Merry Christmas and a happy holiday season, and I will see you guys next time. Bye! This video is made possible through the generous support of my Patreon members. Thank you. I typically pick recipes more out of curiosity rather than for tastiness, so... Whew. Okay, I love this sweater, but it's actually a little warm for today. It's a 1915, like knit from a 1915 pattern. I was trying to be festive. I decorated my typewriter. I got lights and Christmassy, flowery, berry fake bits. Most working class families and those on the sort of the lower socio-economical, I feel I have to specify this because I just watched a show on like HGTV the other day, and I'm not gonna name names, but they kept calling this house Victorian. And they were walking through this house and saying, look at this beautiful Victorian architecture, and we're going to restore it to its original Victorian time period. And the house was built in 1910. They're very different styles, and it bothered me. So, anyway. Thumbnail. What? What am I even doing? I should be like... Oh, can I make it look like I'm holding stuff? I don't know, my wrists don't really bend at that angle. Ow! I want to be like I'm holding stuff flat, but